Tim, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank the OIAC members who are here today and their colleagues back home in their states for hosting this holiday luncheon. I hope all of you are ready to enjoy a great holiday season, ready to enjoy a fantastic Persian meal. But actually, I'm going to focus a little more on the dark side of why we came here today. I want to address my comments principally to the people who are working for the United States Senate or House, people who are working in Congress. First of all, I salute you and I thank you for your public service to the United States. It's very important, and thank you for coming today. I also want to thank the members of the media who are here today and who may be covering this event. I want to salute your courage for telling the truth. It's pretty hard to put a spin on the remarks that you heard, the facts that Madame Rajavi has given you, and particularly the video clips from inside Iran. And there are many more like that. I saw one today from Iran. It was a funeral gathering for one of the deceased protesters with thousands upon thousands of people. That was today on a cell phone video, and there are many more like that. So I want to challenge any members of the media who talk about Iran, any producers, executives of media organizations, any think tank Iran experts who build their career by interviewing Iranian officials and want to maintain access to Tehran. There will come a time soon, I predict, when you will be judged by whether you got the story right or whether you maintained access to a regime which is perhaps on the verge of collapse. I urge you to rethink your position, to tell the story of this group, of these Americans, of the relatives who perished in the jails of Iran and the streets of Iran under the thumb of the regime. That is the story. And I have to comment, now you know why Iran spent so much money and went to Syria's defense in 2011. Now you know what they were trying to prevent. This is why they went to Syria in 2011 when the Arab Spring arrived, to prevent what you just saw, to prevent what started a few weeks ago on the streets of Iran. But it can't be stopped because of the protests in Lebanon, the protests in Iraq against Iranian influence, and the protests, frankly, around the world, in Bolivia, in Chile, in Hong Kong. This is a movement that is against authoritarian repression, and it is particularly acute in Iran today. So they have failed to stop this uprising. And so I'm going to challenge my friends who work on the Senate and ask some harder questions. Are you ready to brief your senators on what is happening and what will happen in Iran? The protests may have started in December of 2017, but in the past 2 weeks, a new situation has developed. The regime has begun opening fire on their own citizens. Do you remember Syria? In 2011, the Assad regime did the same thing with their citizens protesting in the southern town of Deraa. And then the barrel bombs started falling throughout Syria. As the world watched, an entire country was destroyed, with over 500,000 killed, 11 million displaced, 11 million driven from their homes, 5.6 million Syrians, women, children, elders, driven into exile, many of them sitting in refugee camps today. And the leaders of Syria, Iran, and Russia are all guilty of war crimes. The bombing continues right now in Idlib in Syria, and now the red line has been crossed in Iran. Are we going to sit silently and watch a brutal dictatorship massacre more of its own citizens? My friends in the NCRI can't keep up with the numbers. You just heard the latest, over 1,000 dead, over 300 named victims. Those numbers could go up by hundreds in 24 hours. Are your senators just going to sit there? And that's what this is about today. You really do need to get some answers. Are you ready to explain why the people have risen up? It's not just a recent hike in the gas prices. Gas prices have gone up many, many times in Iran. It's not because America withdrew from the JCPOA nuclear accord. The economy was collapsing before the sanctions were put on by the Americans. That revolution was never consummated in 1979. And this has kept coming back to the streets in 1981, in 1999, in 2009, and now it's back in full force in 2019. That's what's happening. So you need to explain the history of this regime and why they never achieved legitimacy. Are you ready to help your senators organize hearings? Can you find Iran experts who anticipated the collapse of the clerical regime? Good luck with that. I've listened to all of the think tank Iran watchers and media correspondents. They all say the same thing. Oh, the regime is in no danger of collapse. How many of them predicted the fall of the Soviet Union? So I think we need to rethink and avoid strategic surprise. Are you ready to explain why Iran will not collapse into chaos, as happened, unfortunately, in Iraq and Libya? Iran is different from Iraq and Libya. No offense to those great Arab countries. They have 2,500 years of proud civilization. They have well over a century of striving for democracy. And are you ready to identify people among the opposition groups of Iran who have a plan to move toward legitimate government based on consent of the governed? You're sitting in a room with people, all of whom can explain to you what that plan is. Are you ready for Congress to make specific recommendations to the administration? You've heard some ideas already today about the internet. That's vital. Perhaps there could be a UN Security Council resolution offering international support and good offices if there is to be a transition from the clerical regime to a legitimate government. Look at 2254, which was the Syria resolution. Why shouldn't the Iranian people enjoy the same support from the world community? How about an offer that the US will end sanctions against Iran if Iran creates a legitimate constitutional government and forswears nuclear weapons? An offer like that would make a difference in the street. How about calling for a thorough counterintelligence investigation to identify the regime's agents of influence in the United States? And guess what? They will find many. And this includes, I'm sorry to say, parts of the media. The public needs to understand how certain news groups and reporters have made a tacit deal with the regime in order to gain privileged access and safe passage in and out of Iran. How about asking the FBI to vet the most visible experts, the ones who get quoted in the Times and the Post and all the other papers every day about Iran, who seem to have easy access to senior leaders of this regime? How about examining how the regime may have supported some of the other opposition groups in order to divide and conquer and make sure that all of those Iranians who want to see change never unite into a single force? So my friends working on Capitol Hill, you need to be ready, because one fine day, you're going to have a lot of work to do. You need to know why the people rose up, why the regime collapsed, why the Washington experts didn't see it coming, and above all, what to do next. So that's why we came here today, to make sure that the United States is not guilty of strategic surprise in Iran, as we were 40 years ago when the Shah fell from power. So you thought this was a free lunch, and to my friends on the Senate staff, I came here to make you work harder. So here are some questions, and I'll just run through them, and then you're going to hear from two great American leaders. First, if the NCRI is not a terrorist group, and it never was, and that's a fact, why did the US government and other governments find it convenient to put them on the terrorism list? That's actually an easy question. There are plenty of books written about that. The NCRI was the one who exposed Iran's nuclear enrichment program in the early 2000s. They've published detailed books. Many of them are probably outside the door here. Book after book on subjects like a guide to all of the bases of the Revolutionary Guards in Syria, who the commanders are, where they're located, the locations of the regime's terrorist sites and training sites inside Iran, details of the industrial conglomerates that are owned by the religious foundations under the supreme leader or the Revolutionary Guards. They control all the contracting. They control all the banks, as you've already heard. Books about many of the aspects of the smuggling routes throughout the Middle East, a guide to the regime's recent terror operations across Europe, country by country, and now a guide to the regime's security leaders in each of the provinces of Iran, the people running the suppression of the protests. In other words, they've generated an entire catalog of well-written, well-researched publications, which are all registered with the Library of Congress. And so here's the question. They've been accused of being a terrorist group. Can you name any other terrorist group, or any terrorist group, that has a large and growing library of impressively well-researched scholarship on international security affairs? I don't know of any, but I can't cite any classics in the Library of Congress by Abu Nidal or George Habash or Aum Shinrikyo or Al-Qaeda or ISIS. As you can see, it has become almost ridiculous and obscene to consider these people terrorists. They are educated Iranians who have committed themselves to freedom in Iran. So folks, we need to tell everyone in Washington, stop repeating regime propaganda. The NCRI and the MEK are not and never were terrorists. 4 major court cases and US intelligence and law enforcement have concluded this long ago, but somehow the word hasn't reached the smart people inside the Beltway. Now, why would anyone, here's a question, why would anyone not encourage a group that for many years encouraged separation of church and state in Iran, gender equality, legitimacy from the ballot box, a non-nuclear Iran, rule of law with an independent judiciary and due process, and good relations with the rest of the world? Why wouldn't you stand behind such a group? And when you figure out why so many people in Washington have been afraid to support all of the principles that Americans stand for, please let your senators know. If it helps, the sponsors here can give you books and articles that answer that question. I've authored a couple of them myself. Another question, this event today was co-sponsored by Americans, Iranian Americans from OIAC branches in 33 states, plus the District of Columbia. Every branch talks with their elected representatives and their senators. Can you name a community of Iranian Americans other than this one that even comes close to the OIAC in terms of the breadth and depth of membership? They organized this event because all of these Americans have family ties from every corner of Iran, and they're now living in every corner of America. They run successful businesses, they raise families, they represent the American dream, and they're trying to send Congress a message. This regime has no future. America must prepare to support the people of Iran when the regime collapses. To you. I'm almost done here. Here's another question. Have you noticed that some analysts and journalists keep asking, where does the National Council of Resistance of Iran get their financial support? This is kind of an annoying question that keeps coming up. Well, if any of you have questions about this, I assure you that any member of the OIAC here today will be glad to explain how the Iranian diaspora and many Iranians inside Iran support the NCRI. And have you noticed that no one ever asks, where does the son of the deposed Shah of Iran, Reza Shah, get money to run a huge campaign appealing for help in his apparent bid to reclaim his father's position back in Iran? No one ever asks, where's his money coming from? You know why? I suppose the only question is, how much of the people's money, how many billions of dollars did the Shah move into foreign banks to support his family before fleeing the country? Everybody knows where that money came from. So my friends working for the Senate, you need to start asking these questions. And finally, I'm sure you all heard about the infamous CIA coup against Prime Minister Mossadegh in 1953. The US and the British Secret Services succeeded in deposing the nationalist patriot Mohammad Mossadegh and bringing the Shah back into power from exile. We have faced, as a country, relentless criticism for this geopolitical sin for 66 years now. So when you hear someone talking about supporting Reza Shah as an alternative to the Ayatollahs, ask yourself this. Are you seriously talking about repeating one of our nation's most notorious mistakes? Do you seriously think the people of Iran want the United States to bring the Shah back again? So let me finish with a little secret you'll never hear from our experts on Iranian policy inside the Beltway. Can you guess what happened to the nationalist ideas and agenda of the deposed Prime Minister Mossadegh? What happened to Mossadegh's nationalism? Well, guess what? The National Council of Resistance of Iran, the Mujahideen Khalq living in Albania, and the OIAC supporters here and all across the United States are all the intellectual heirs of Iran's great nationalist hero, Mossadegh, and the freedom movement he inspired. In other words, you are dining today with people who stand for an Iran governed with democracy, freedom, self-determination, universal principles, and unalienable rights. So the holidays are coming. So is change in Iran.